Hi everybody, this is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. Want to do another video in the series, the Pastors Course. This is video number 46. This is in chapter 10. It's your in your worldview, and then in your worldview in chapter 10 there are 5 propositions. The first one, today's video, is come to an understanding of the history of your church, your town, and your country, or maybe I should say your village. So this is very important, and any minister, any pastor needs to really have a good understanding of his own immediate history, not just in a general sense, but in a specific sense. He knows and understands the history of his country in general, but he knows about its developments. In particular, he understands how his own town, or even his own village, or even his own family have had this spiritual development, or even their economic development, or even their social development. He understands, for example, how the gospel was spread in his own country and what change this made. He understands and knows the evangelists and pastors that were used of God to bring about the current spiritual state of his country. He also understands and knows the revivals that have swept through his country over the years. He has investigated the effect that these revivals have had in social, educational, and health reforms. He understands the very long-term effects of the revivals in terms of the restraint that has been brought to open and private vices. Being informed like this, this gives the pastor a sort of 4-dimensional view of his own country. The pastor also understands and appreciates the current state of his country in every sense, but in particular spiritually. So he knows about the religions of his own country, the cults, the sects. He knows about its public sins, its aesthetic movements. He also knows about the various Christian denominations that exist. Having obtained an understanding of the country, he also understands his country's place in the world. On a different level, the pastor understands his own city and his own town and his own village. He knows the issues that his city struggles with, the issues socially and in business, but more important, he understands the spiritual state of his city or town or village. The pastor is able to describe the spiritual state of his city, town or village, and he knows the key personalities in the religious landscape. He knows the theological landscape. His investigation has led him to a very in-depth knowledge of what is happening spiritually in his own locality. Now, this knowledge and understanding has brought him to become one of the most well-informed people in his own town or city or village. Some pastors are not aware as much of this, but it is a huge benefit to pastors to understand these things very well. Lastly, but perhaps more important, he understands the history of his own church. He knows the historical context of its founding. He knows the people involved. He knows the historical setting and the context of its history. He knows the leaders that have led the church and the locations in which the church has met. He knows the struggles that they have had and the successes that they have had in mission and in their own spiritual development. He knows the divisions that have taken place. He knows the discipline that needed to be exercised. He understands too the theological history and the theological distinctives of his own church. The pastor understands the country, the city, the town, and the church. He knows its failings and its successes. Of all the things the pastor knows, He knows the context of his own ministry and mission. So here's the questions for today. And these are the questions that may need to take quite a bit of research. How well do you know your country? How well do you know its spiritual history? How well do you know your town or even your little village or your street? How well can you describe its spiritual history? How well do you know your church? Do you know about its founding, the people involved, the successes and the failures, its pastors, evangelists, and teachers? Do you know the standing that your church has in its own locality? And what do people say when they talk about your church? And lastly, what do they say about you? Now, you may not find that very easy to discover, because you might be in a situation in which nobody tells you what they really think. It's very possible as a pastor to live in a little world all of your own, a little world with rose-colored spectacles, because no one will tell you. They want to be too kind to you. They have a lot of respect for you. They don't want to give you bad news. They wouldn't want to tell you their criticisms. And this was a great problem for many a man. And one of the famous evangelists of old, William Grimshaw, would sometimes cover himself up and over his face and over his head, and he would be like a woman walking along the road with a stick. And he would get in amongst the people and he would listen to what they had to say when the minister was not present. And then he would throw off his garb and give them a serious rebuke from the Lord. But you see, the point is, they had so much respect for him, they couldn't tell him the bad news. They couldn't tell him about what the situation really was like. And that's the difficult challenge that you have to face. So we look forward to catching up with you next time. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you all. Bye for now.